And we are live, and we are here, and it is a happy hour. And because it is a happy hour, crack the adult beverage of your choice. And there we go. All right, cool. So listen, welcome everybody to MystaraCon 2021. I'm Brant, as you can see the Chiron down there, right? I trust that you guys can all read. I'm Brant from the Armchair Dragoons. We are one of the folks who are co-sponsoring this whole thing. We were the ones handling kind of the registration back end pieces of this. So welcome. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you all very much. Victor, absolutely go grab a canned cocktail as much as you want. And Colonel Bruce, hey, welcome to MystaraCon 2021. Thank you all very much for being here. Hey, listen, Mr. Welch is going to be along shortly. He had a delay at work where somebody screwed something up and he had to kind of clean up the mess. So he's running a few minutes behind. The rest of us are all here. I got multiple monitors bouncing around. But he's going to be along in a few minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let folks kind of guide the chat here a little bit. So the y'all, whatever it is y'all want to talk about, there is no real agenda to this other than let's say hi and sort of spend a little bit of time kind of hanging out together. What do Mystarans drink? I'm sure there is some variety of ale because under that technology, like the water would kill you. So I'm sure there's all sorts of things and all kinds of people I'm no doubt will answer in the chat here on YouTube. Absolutely no doubt of that whatsoever. The story behind how MystaraCon came to be was there were a bunch of folks talking about wanting to do something specific for Mystara, trying to have, a couple of panels, a couple of folks get together and talk about it a little bit, be able to run some games in it. Just by way of explanation, some of the scheduling stuff wasn't ideal, and I apologize for that because that's mostly my fault. And so what had happened there was originally when Mr. Welch and I were talking about some of the scheduling on this, we were looking at a date in October, and we had plenty of lead time to work on that. The problem was this year, those of you that track the wider gaming world know that Origins had moved out of the summer and moved to an October date. Well, the Armchair Dragoons do a pretty significant program at Origins every year. We handle a lot of the wargaming program at Origins. And so I was pretty tied up dealing with that. And what that meant was I wasn't able to devote a lot of attention to MystaraCon. The follow-up to that was looking at the calendar beyond October. It was either this weekend or February because once we get past Thanksgiving, like nothing happens over the holidays here in the U.S. And then the Dragoons have a major event over MLK weekend every year. And that was going to tie up any additional attention that I had. So it was kind of this weekend or like February. And no kidding, it was going to be a while. And we wanted to at least get something in. So it's a limited program. I get it. I would love to have had a whole lot more for everybody to be able to play with. But look, we're pulling all this off with, in weeks, not months. And I hope folks are still able to have a good time. So let's see. See in chat entries is pop-ups, but not captions. So here's the deal, Thomas. When you see those things pop up on screen, that's me popping them up on the screen. So that's not you guys. You will see the chat scroll by in YouTube, and that's awesome. But when you start seeing things popping up on screen, that's because it's me throwing those up there. But again, not a lot of agenda tonight. Let's just talk about some Mystara stuff. So one thing I am curious about, folks, throw the comment in the chat. What was the first product that you ever actually read or took a look at or poked around in that was set in Mystara? I know for a lot of us, it was X1, Isle of Dread. That's what it was for me. But I'm sort of curious what it might have been for all of you guys. What was the first thing that you poked around in that was set in the world of Mystara? For bonus, tell us what year it was, just so that some of us can feel really old and others can feel really young. Because for me, that X1 Isle of Dread module was 1982. So it was a while ago for me. But yeah, throw those up and I'll start pulling them up. Oh, let's I say we got your red box, 9 years old. Dude, it's right in my wheelhouse. You were like my younger brother for that age. So would have been X1. Absolutely. It was called Known World back then. Yeah, I don't think the Mystara name came around until we got to the Gazetteers. It had been a while. So yeah, Isle of Dread, absolutely. Hey Joe, hi from North Carolina. Hi also from North Carolina. Not sure where you are in North Carolina. I'm parked in Raleigh, right? I'm right in the middle of the state. But yeah, that's home base for me. We got some folks 87-ish. Quagmire is in here, early 80s. I love that we've got all kinds of early 80s folks in here because y'all are making me not feel so old. I do appreciate that. So here we go, 84-ish. You knew Alina by then. Yeah, everybody did, right? I think everybody had a crush on her back then. So that was fairly normal for a lot of us. Just so you guys know, I'm running multiple monitors here and trying to keep an eye on when Mr. Welch is going to get here, but it could be a little bit. Here's an interesting one, the Savage Coast campaign book. So in 2019. So, hey, Jack, glad you found it. That's pretty cool. 2019 saw Glenn talking about a Mystara module, Test the Warlords. Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the first big sort of carve yourself a niche in the world kind of modules. That was really cool. So, hey, and Travis is in Greensboro. So, all right, we well represented with the North Carolina contingent here. Appreciate that, folks. I guess the hours sort of help us out with that a little bit. So for me, X1, Isle of Dread, and started kind of collecting some stuff from there and picking those things up as I went. I spent a bunch of the 80s living in Europe. My father was in the military, and so we sort of got what we could get based on what the bookstores on the base carried. And that was pretty haphazard. It wasn't like you could ask them to special order a particular thing. You sort of got what showed up. And so anytime I saw any of the X series, once I got through about 2 or 3 of those and realized that they were building the map of the rest of the world onto there, I just started snatching them up as best I could. At the time I started in Mystara, the options were Mystara and Greyhawk. Forgotten Realms was still like 3, 4, 5 years in the future by the time I got around to starting to grab Mystara stuff. And again, it wasn't even called Mystara at the time. It was just the Known World. And so that was pretty cool. So haven't a chance to run anything yet. Find something soon. Appreciate that. Yeah. So here we go. It's great to see. Yeah, it is awesome to see newcomers still make it. I'll tell you, look, I've been reading and interacting with Mystara for 35 years at this point. And I love Glenn's videos because I learned something out of every one of them. They are all awesome. Goodman Games Isle of Dread conversion book. Yeah, that's a great place to find it. Absolutely. So I'm going to pull something up on the side screen here real quick. So y'all bear with me just a second because I am underprepared for having things on screen here. But I do want to throw something up here at you guys. There it goes. And here we are. So no, that's not what I wanted to do. Man, you ever have one of those days when whatever you're trying to do on the computer is just not what you meant to be doing on the computer? I'm having one of those days right now. So it's working out that way. Okay, so I'm gonna try and share some screen here. So this is a page from the Armchair Dragoons site that I just wanted to share with you guys. This is an article that I had actually written several years ago, but this goes through sort of an inventory of a bunch of the original Mystara products as they were published. Look, that's where a lot of us started, right? That's the old X1 map that we all went for. Dawn of the Emperor's box set. Yeah, absolutely. It did look epic. There's a reason it looked epic. It was awesome. So where'd we go? Somebody's got the Gazetteer line minus Hollow World. We're about to see a bunch of that Gazetteer line here in just a second. So this was the original map from X1. what this column is, this is sort of me talking about my personal Mystara stash, and not that it's any better or worse than anybody else's. What I was originally doing was taking photos for a personal inventory of like all my D&D stuff, just so I get a handle on it all. And and so I had all the Mystara stuff in one place. They became one set of photos, and I figured, what the heck, I'll write a column about it, because when you run a website, you get all the content you can from wherever you can, right? That's what you do. So there you go. That's there's one of the old Holmes blue books in the background there, but a lot of us started there, and that's sort of where we all came from. I've actually got I wandering around. I think I've got 4 of those red book covers. So without the captions, it's not. Please let the platform providers know that they are failing hard. If Thomas, I would love to be able to tell them, dude, I'm unfortunately that I'm limited in what the technology is here that I've got to work with. And so I'm sorry to see you go, man. I really wish I had a better solution for you. Absolutely. So working your way through there you go. There's the rest of the red book collection. And so this is just a stack of rule books. Again, I'm sure a lot of you guys have these same things, and can see what's there. But this is collecting through. One thing that I found going through and inventory and all this stuff, for some reason, I cannot find my Immortals rules. I have no idea what the heck happened to them. It's a little annoying, a little frustrating. And here we go. This is the AC series and the B series, and I'm sure a whole lot of you guys have a ton of these. I don't know if anybody's got a particular favorite. If anybody's got a particular favorite B series module, y'all want to chat about some. Most of us, all of us probably, have been through B2 at some point, just because that's the one that shipped in the old red box. Colonel Bruce, I think you're right. I think the captions don't auto-generate live. I think those are generated after the fact. I think you're correct in that assumption. So one of my favorites in here, one of the all-time best D&D modules ever, that B10 right in there. That is, if not the best, one of the top 3 or 4 modules in any series for any rule set that TSR had spit out along the way. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Here's a whole bunch of the X series. That again, a lot of us have probably jumped into these things. I am going to throw the link to this collection in the chat here in just a minute, so that folks can find this article as you're looking for it, as we're talking about it. But this is really where Mystara kind of started to blow up, isn't it? This is where X6, X9, 4 and 5, 11 down the line all started to build onto and add on to the original X1 map, that known world map. So introducing some new folks to Mystara's goodness. Absolutely. No, that's absolutely agree with you here. Totally with you on this one, Nate. B1 through 9 in search of adventure. What's funny is there's one of the B series modules, and I want to say it's B7, that's actually not in that book. Like there's one of them that is not in the book at all. It sort of cracks me up the way they've numbered it. What do we have? Didn't live in a real Joe. I'm with you, man. It felt like that at times living overseas in Europe, where you sort of got what the bookstore and military had there. Ran a campaign based on B4. Yeah, tons of fun there. I'm going to keep scrolling my way through here some. There's the CM series and the DA series when they took the Dave Arneson series, right, when they took Blackmore back to ancient history. It was a lot of fun with that one as well. And then, incidentally, it's tough to find good adventures that you can run in a one-shot for something like a weekend convention like this, right? You could explore the caverns in B2 for a campaign that lasts 4 months, easy. It's tough to find a one-shot. One of the things that I thought might work well as a one-shot for somebody over a weekend like this is actually CM3, is Saber River up in here. And so that one's not too bad. Where'd it go? As a side, it was truncated. It was tournament module. Okay, there it is. All right, so here's some of the other ones that started to pop up, those DDA modules and some of the M series, which obviously I'm missing a handful of them. I'm not 100% sure where they are. And again, I don't know where any of my Immortals stuff is. I'm wondering if I got rid of any of it. There's my Gaz collection. None of these are print on demand. All of these were bought off the rack, usually at one of the bookstores. By the time the Gaz series was being released, I had moved back to the U.S. and I was in college for a lot of these. And so I was buying them at the local game store where I got to be pretty good friends with those guys. And then working our way through, there's the trail maps. Yes, I have one still in the shrink wrap, and no, you can't have it. There we go. So what do we got? B8, Journey to Rock. They only included one of the 3 trails to the Rock. Yeah. I knew there was some stuff missing from the B1 through 9. I just couldn't remember what it was off the top of my head. So thank y'all for helping keep us together there. There's Orc Wars. One of these days, somebody's going to put Orc Wars into Tabletop Simulator. I cannot wait for somebody to do that, because then we've got Orc Wars to be able to play at a digital convention like this. Same thing with X10. Would love for the war game component of X10 to get put into Tabletop Simulator so that we'd be able to do something with it here on a weekend like this. Somebody up thread mentioned Dawn of the Emperors. There it is. I have no idea how I ended up with 2 extra copies of the Player's Guides. I have no idea. No clue how that happened. But I got them, so why not? There's your Hollow World stuff. It's interesting that there are a lot of Mystara fans who know the Hollow World well and really think it's kind of cool. I've not run into very many Hollow World fans who are aware of the old Warlord comic with the world of Skartaris, which was essentially the Hollow World of Mystara fame. The geography, the concept, not the same setting. But the Warlord comics with Skartaris had existed for a good 10 years before the Hollow World was a thing as a product. So I have no doubt that you are 100% correct, that somebody would be happy to take an extra Player's Guide off my hands. Make me a ridiculously obscene 7-figure offer and we can talk. I'm all for it. Love the Hollow World. So, where did my window go? Eek. Here we are. There's my Wrath of the Immortal stuff. Again, ended up with an extra book in there somewhere. Not really sure how, but hey, I'm gonna hold on to it for now. There's Champions of Mystara. Again, a lot of fun with the airships, and having been built out of the Voyage of the Princess Ark. This was a lot of fun, especially if you'd been reading the Voyage of the Princess Ark and all the Dragon magazines as they'd been coming along, and then seeing all that material collected. I will tell you, so some of you know about Bruce Hurd's newest venture with the World of Kaladar, where Kaladar takes on a lot of the feel of the Princess Ark series of stories. And Kaladar's pretty neat stuff. I've got most of them on PDF. The stuff that I've backed from Bruce's Kickstarters. Kaladar stuff's a lot of fun. It's a blast. When we have Bruce on tomorrow night as kind of the keynote panel for this whole thing, we're intending to have Bruce talk about Kaladar a bit as well, not just the older Mystara stuff, so that folks can get a sense of sort of what he's up to these days and kind of where he's focused his attention, similar to what used to be in the old world of Mystara. So, burn it, that adventure is bad. Well, some of it's not all great. So Travis, the Journey to the Center of the Earth, there's definitely some stuff happening underground there, but I don't know that Jules Verne treated the Earth as fully hollow. I think there was just a lot of stuff dug around underground. So this is fun. Victor says to burn it, and Joe says he loved it, and so we can do both. Is the Princess Ark compiled anywhere? So sort of in the Champions of Mystara is probably your best compilation. So that might be where you can find that stuff. One of the things with Wrath of the Immortals, I'm going to scroll back up here. If anybody's read the Designers and Dragons series of books that sort of traces role-playing history from the start all the way up to the 2010s, the way the writer, it's Shannon Appelkline, who's been around the role-playing business for a long time. The way Shannon builds those chapters is he starts the history of the company in the book that covers the years when that company was founded and tracks that history all the way forward until that company ends. So, for instance, TSR was founded in 74. So you will find the history of TSR in the book that covers the 70s and 80s, that covers the 70s. Even though a lot of the action happens in the 80s and 90s, everything is written about in the book on the 70s. And so Shannon sort of spins those things forward. One of the things that you find when he's talking about a bunch of the companies that were founded in the 80s and still publishing in the early and mid 90s, folks like White Wolf, to an extent, the TSR folks, the guys that were doing Torg over at West End Games, Wrath of the Immortals is very much a product of its time in that it's one of those meta plot sort of adventures, in that it changes the world in which everything exists to a great degree. Look at Sphinx Continent, right? And so it's not just discrete adventures that you can sort of drop into anything you want. It dramatically makes changes to the world. It's similar to the Harlequin plot in Shadowrun. It's similar to some of the big plot lines that were in the White Wolf, Vampire and Werewolf games, those Storyteller games. Torg had several massive meta plot storylines that changed the underlying setting of the game. There was a series of books for Forgotten Realms. I want to say it was the Avatar series, but don't anybody hold me to that because I'm not a Forgotten Realms expert. That changed the way in which things happened in the Forgotten Realms across the entire notion of the realms. And so that meta plot was very much an artifact of its time, of the early and mid 90s. Wrath of the Immortals is one of those. That's sort of where it comes from. There's Champions of Mystara. Victor's telling us Champions of Mystara only compiles later adventures. Okay, so yeah, the whole time travel incident. If somebody knows better where there is a consolidated everything from Princess Arc, it probably exists on the Vaults of Pandia somewhere. But if somebody happens to know, please share. Let us know. So there you go. Yeah. PDF with all the Princess Arc articles might have been on Pandia. I think you're right. Let's put it this way. If it's not on Pandius, I don't know where it would be. It might be other places as well, but I can't imagine it's not there at least. Here's the rest of the Hollow World stuff that I've got, plus I've got 3 of the 4 creature crucibles. Again, not showing off, just trying to give us something to be here to talk about a little bit. There's your Poor Wizard's Almanacs. Okay, show of hands. Who else hated when they rebranded the Poor Wizard's Almanacs into Joshua's Almanac? I did. I thought it was dumb, but nobody asked me. They just kept selling me stuff. So this is an interesting diversion here a little bit. The big boxes that were released around 93 and the Cave Mouth modules that all took place in that Thunder Rift area. Notionally, you could drop those into the mountains on the north side of Karameikos. That those were sort of loosely up there. They weren't explicitly in Mystara, but they were easy enough to drop into Mystara. And so one of the things that I liked about those box sets, though, is that the maps were all compatible with each other. So they were very easy to switch around the maps between the different adventures and use pieces and parts from them. If any of y'all remember that dreadful Dragon Strike board game with an absolutely cringe-inducing video that it came with, the maps in that were also compatible with these. So that was kind of handy. So never collected Thunder Rift. Hey, totally get it. I was a bit of a weird completist about Beckme stuff. those 3 rule cyclopedias were all bought off the shelf back in the early 90s. One of them I'd bought originally, but then once they went out of print, whenever I saw them at used bookstores, I'd grab them because you never knew when you were going to find them again. So I have a couple. I'd actually at one point had 5, and I gave one to a friend who had his wrecked when part of his garage flooded in a real bad storm. And then I sold another one for an obscene amount of money. Somebody offered me like $60-$70 for one. So I figured I could let one go for that. But these are not the print on demand ones. These are the original ones. And then here's some of the AD&D material. And I don't mince any words. Here's where it all falls to shit. The Beckme series was discontinued. I was not a fan once things shifted to AD&D, and at the same time that the content was shifting to AD&D, that's around the same time TSR had fully unplugged from using AOL as their official online support presence. That's around the same time Bruce left the company and kind of stopped the support for Mystara that he had done through that AOL area. And the community just really fractured to a great degree. I'm glad the Pandius guys were able to salvage a lot of that and bring a lot of that back. But that's really where a lot of things started to fracture and where I stopped kind of paying as much attention. Same thing like Red Steel. Look, this was X9 just built out in greater detail, but why rebrand it as something not Mystara? It was a little frustrating there. So I went for $50 on eBay. I'm hoping that was $50 for one of the original ones and not one of the like print on demand reprints, because that's awful. What do we got? Rule Cyclopedia right now. Holy crap. All right. So anybody got car payments coming up? It's a car payment or a Rule Cyclopedia. These were the Fame and Fortune cards that came with the 2nd edition player's guide. And then here's just some random stuff I found in another box. So I've got like multiple copies of a handful of things. Didn't even realize I had. And then there's the Dragon Strike. Good God, that was awful. Anybody ever actually watch the Dragon Strike video? If so, I apologize on behalf of humanity, because that was pretty bad. I'm gonna go ahead and kill the stream there, but I will throw the link to this in the YouTube chat for anybody that wants to go take a look at those extended musings on Mystara. So, my fandom of Mystara, like I said, for me, it was one of the first, I don't want to say fully coherent game worlds, because that's not, look, you've got some pretty crazy geological and meteorological improbabilities next to each other on the map. But it was one of the first game worlds where everything didn't just fit together, but sort of obviously fit together, the way all the maps pieced together, the way you could expand your explorations in a sensible way across the scope of Mystara, far more coherently than you ever could with Greyhawk. And again, this was before Forgotten Realms ever existed. And that's one of the big things that really attracted me to all of this. Here we go. So Victor, Red Steel was actually interesting. Look, I thought Red Steel was a fascinating way in which to expand the game world. I had no issue with the content of the product. I had a lot of issues with the marketing of the product, in that they tried to treat it as a completely separate setting that had no connection back to Mystara. And that was more frustrating than anything. It's almost like if they had taken the Moonshae Isles and completely separated them from the rest of the Forgotten Realms and started a whole new product line that was just Moonshae. Like that wouldn't have made a lot of sense to people that were fans of the Forgotten Realms. And that's sort of what happened there. So, holy cow. Hey, Jeff, welcome. Glad you could be here. Sorry you weren't able to actually make it to join in any of the panels, but I appreciate that you were there. DJ, where'd we go? DJ, yeah, I think you may be right on the marketing side of things. There were, at that point in TSR's history, to say that there were some questionable marketing decisions is probably being charitable. So that might be the most polite way to say it. What do we got? Funny video about Dragon Strike. Yeah, so Dragon Strike actually it wasn't officially D&D. It was sort of the simplified D&D just to help, 9-year-olds learn D&D because TSR thought 9-year-olds were dumb, I guess. Because how many of us learned regular old D&D at 9 years old? And that's, that seemed to be what they were shooting for. So go figure. Not really sure where that came from. So that's a handful of what I've got there. My involvement with Mystara went a little beyond just what you were seeing in sort of that photographic tour. When Mystara was its own thing on the old AOL message boards, this would have been the mid 90s when TSR's official presence was on AOL. A lot of those message board archives are stored over at the Vaults of Pandius. I have no idea where they got those message board archives, but they're stored over on the Vaults of Pandius, which is, totally cool. I'm in there a bunch as B1 Bard. That's who I was back then. The Bard. There we go. Hold on. You'd think I'd know a little more about this stuff. So, add banner. There we are. So yeah, that was me back on those old AOL message boards. If you go looking for it, I was one of the folks that compiled a bunch of the early net mags that are still available at the Vaults of Pandius. It was text files and it was GIFs and JPEGs that were all just basic black and white because that's what we had. That's what we knew how to do at the time. It was pretty limited. Jeff, we're cousins, man. That's us. We're also old, right? But yeah, we're kind of cousins there. Demos couldn't agree more. Absolutely. So, if you go back and look at some of those old things, that's where that's where I got to know Bruce, was interacting with him there, and then circled back around to meeting him much later. One of the other people that will be on tomorrow night's show with Bruce is James Mishler, who's been around the role-playing business for a long time, has worked with the Troll Lords, among other people, had worked with F&W Publications for a while, who were the guys that did Scry Magazine, among others. James was one of those old AOL message board denizens, and that's where James and I got to be friends when we later ended up working together on a variety of projects. So, you worked for AOL back in the 90s. My condolences. Actually, it was probably kind of fun back in the 90s. I imagine somewhere around 98 is when it stopped being quite as much fun. The official, well, calling them official is probably giving us way, way, way more credit than we deserve. I think it was the first attempt at doing something that now looks like Threshold Magazine. But back then, we didn't know what we were doing, right? We were just sort of trying to come up with the best we could. And so we'd have a half a dozen text files and a half a dozen graphics files, and we'd throw them all together into one archive and dump it into the AOL file archive download area and say, hey, here it is. Come check it out if you want. And so we had a variety of people give us just some of their local characters just that we could use as NPCs in other people's campaigns. Yeah, hence the quotes. No kidding. So, but that's kind of what those things were. We got 7 or 8 of them out before. It was a combination of sort of loss of inertia amongst the community where people kind of quit contributing stuff. We the shift from BECME to AD&D didn't help. That certainly hurt some things as well. And it sort of lost steam. And so we kind of just let them go. I will tell you, so Demos is absolutely right. Threshold is awesome. I don't like reading a lot of PDF magazines just because I don't like having to use the digital tools for the reading. I would absolutely pay, anywhere up to like $10 or $12 for a mailed printed copy of Threshold. I'd be all over that. but I do still, Threshold's one of the ones I make an exception for. I like reading that one. And so I'll even in PDF form, I'll read that one because it is a great product. It absolutely is. It's a lot of fun. And I really appreciate those dudes doing that. So they've done a great job with it. The folks in the chat, not just what was your first Mystara product, because we've been through some of those. What was one of your favorite Mystara products, especially one if you were able to actually play one, not just read them? We all enjoyed reading Wrath of the Immortals, right? We all enjoyed reading a bunch of the Hollow World stuff. What was one of your favorite ones that you actually got a chance to play your way through? For me, hands down, it's B10, right? It's B10 every day, all day. I've done it nonstop. Come back to it quite a few times. Love it to death, and will always sing the praises of B10. It was always a lot of fun. DA2 Temple of the Frog. Absolutely a cool one. Going back into some ancient history there within Mystara. There you go. Glenn, if we could pull that off, maybe somebody needs to do what Mr. Welch did and format all of those Mystara things to send to Lulu and compile them all into a print on demand you can order from Lulu. There we go. The first two of the Desert Nomad series. Yeah, those absolutely can be a lot of fun. Still a fun one to revisit. B2, I think, was one of the first adventures for damn near every one of us. What else we got here? Rule Cyclopedia loves, Undersea Adventures can be a lot of fun. What do we got here? Mystara spells compiled in the Latter Day Wizard spell comp. Okay. Isle of Dread. Look, for folks that loved a good old-fashioned hex crawl and just kind of expanding the world, that was definitely a good place to do that. A lot of folks, Castle Amber, I think, really kind of screwed with a lot of people because you actually had to think your way through it, right? You couldn't just hack and slash your way through Castle Amber. So you really had to think your way through it. Where'd we go? I'm just keeping up with some of the chat here. One of the things for folks that haven't seen it yet, I'm going to pull it up on the side screen again here. Guys, if you haven't seen the Mystara Player's Guide that Mr. Welch and others have put together, you are definitely doing yourselves a disservice. I'm going to sound like an infomercial for this thing here. This was absolutely incredible to see how well put together this thing was. By way of background, I've, again, been around the role-playing world since the early 80s. I spent a bunch of years working in graphic design and publishing and such. I've been doing graphic design off and on since the mid-'80s, and I've taught it at the college level. And to see something this well put together that is a fan-made product is astounding. It is absolutely fascinating and fantastic. And so for folks that haven't seen the Mystara Player's Guide, I sprung for the nice paper and the hardcover over at Lulu, and it was absolutely worth the $50. There's no way you're going to go wrong with this. This is an incredible product, and everybody should definitely take advantage of that if you're a big Mystara fan. It is a bit of a miscellany here and there. Again, 5e character conversions and class conversions for all the stuff that's introduced in all the different gazetteers and box sets. But then just a lot of collected random information. So, you've got the coins of Mystara, the coins of the known world, and some of the dread creatures of Mystara. So there's a lot of great material in this book that you should absolutely take a look at if you're a big fan of Mystara. You can get it soft cover without the fancy paper for something in the mid-20s, but it's totally worth the full price to go get the full meal deal there. Would definitely say it's one to check out. Let's go back and keep up with some of the other favorites here. Great stuff played out of Dungeon Magazine. It would be cool if you could remember some of those titles and authors to help us out so we can all go track them down and go take a look. Jeff said the Hollow World box set. Yeah, absolutely. Never played in one, always been a DM. Man, I feel for you, Jeff. I really do. Victor enjoyed Castle Amber. Yeah. You're right. It does look amazing. I'm telling you again, I've worked in this business, and the fact that this was a fan-made product is hard to fathom. It really is an incredible product. Totally. And look, Glenn's not on the stream yet, so it's not like I'm just kissing up because he's here or something. Like it really is that good. Want to get a copy? Yeah, do it. Do it. Yes, you do. Christmas is coming up. Tell somebody to order it for you. So interestingly enough, there are some links floating around out there for people to go throw some votes in over at Wizards for which settings you'd like to see brought back. And Mystara is an option this time around. When there was one of the video casts going on with one of the 4E designers, I don't remember which one, or one of the product managers. It might have been Mike Merles, but don't hold me to that. I don't want to slander the dude unnecessarily if I'm wrong. They were talking about Mystara on one of the webcasts, and he was kind of openly derisive of it, which was unfortunate. Thought it was sort of goofy and cartoonish, and yeah, there's some goofy elements there. There's goofy elements in every one of those TSR settings somewhere along the way. Mystara overall does seem to hang together as well or better as just about any of them. What else we got here? Looks fantastic on the cover. Yeah. What do we got? Anyone got the Dungeon Magazine index spreadsheet? I'm sure it's out there. I don't have a link, so I'm not able to help you with that. Here we go. Nice reimagining of Castle Amber. Yeah, it is. So what else we got? Like Castle Greyhawk isn't goofy. Exactly. You're making my point for me. Thank you. I appreciate the backup. So there absolutely was some goofiness. One of the things that they were talking about on that webcast that night was like the turtles being a little wackadoodle. You know what, man? The turtles had been around long before Mystara sort of canonized them and made them official. They'd been around for quite a while. There's plenty of other goofiness in other places that you don't need. You don't need to find goofiness in Mystara to pick on things. That said, Mystara had its share of goofiness. Anybody that's read PC2, right, the Top Ballista one, it came out not long after Top Gun was in the movie theaters, and so Top Ballista was the cool way to sort of riff on that. It's a flying aircraft carrier full of sort of tinker gnomes. It is goofy, right? I'm not going to pretend otherwise. It is absolutely goofy as hell. It was fun, but it was goofy. Turtles rock. Turtles do rock. So somebody needed to play a turtle character named Shelly. So silly and goof is okay in moderation. Yeah, it can be. Absolutely. Totally with you. What we got? Book of Wondrous Adventures. Sure. Turtles of the Purple Sage. Yeah. PC2, look, dude, PC2 is a lot of fun to read. I don't know as I'd necessarily want to play a whole lot of the scenario content out of PC2, but as something to read, yeah, it was a riot. It was absolutely fun to read. So it was sometimes players get goofy. So they totally do. All right. We're getting closer to the top of the hour. I'm hoping Mr. Welch is going to show up here soon. Y'all got to give me just a second here, and I need a drink because I've been babbling for the better part of 40 minutes. Kind of. Look, I do a podcast with the Armchair Dragoons, but there's a reason why I bring like 3 other people on every episode with me, so I don't have to do this. So our the Dragoons are good friends with our buddy Ardwolf from Ardwolf's Lair, who does a lot of role-playing content alongside his wargame content. He's a little more of a sci-fi guy with his Traveler stuff. He's also a big Harn fan. Gary, every Monday night, Gary does a 2-hour live show. I have no idea how the hell he sustains a 2-hour live show doing this stuff. You guys are wearing me out after one. Use Flying City, Flying Machines, side quest. Yeah, there you go. That's probably what you're looking for there. Yeah, the Magic Items book has had some silliness over the years. Totally can agree with that. Let me take a peek at how close Mr. Welch might be to joining us here. Sadly, again, waylaid by some work that has tied it up. So we'll see if we can get there. Hey, do we happen to have the DM for tomorrow's Black Rose event on here? If so, like send up a flare in the comments just so we can snag you. So doesn't seem like it. So yeah, I've worked either booths or GM stuff at Origins since 2005, all but maybe 2 years. I missed the year that they did it in May for whatever bonehead reason. They were in May one year, and I missed the year that I got laid off and I couldn't make it. Other than that, every year that I've been to Origins, I've either been a GM or an exhibitor, or 1 year I was there as a journalist. I've never just walked up, bought a ticket, and walked into Origins. One of the tricks that we learned that very first year back in 2005 was you go hit Dollar Tree, right? And go buy a bag of mixed hard candy and just stick them in your pockets to walk around with. It helps keep your voice up. Absolutely. In fact, that's the jar left over from this year's Origins of the hard candies that I've got sitting on my desk here at the house. So, all right, Victor, so here's the question. Do the players need to submit their character sheets to you ahead of time, or can they just sort of show up with what they've got and you'll troubleshoot them in progress right there before the thing starts? I'm asking because a local friend of mine here just sent me a message and said, hey, curious about this event, interested in playing, what do I need to do? And so I figured I'd ask since you're here. So what do we got? Armando saying the D&D novels trilogy, the Penhaligon trilogy. Yeah, so you're right, not the best writing. And that was unfortunate because I think those were coming along at a time where if the Mystaran books had been even a minor hit, similar to those for the Forgotten Realms, that might have helped prolong Mystara's lifespan a little bit. I can't say that for certain. Wasn't around at the time. Just talking to some of the people I've talked to and knowing some of what I know from behind the scenes, it might have made a difference, a limited one. But again, by that time, Bruce was sort of checking himself out, and without him inside the building to be that loud voice in the room, that champion for the setting, you'd like to think it would have stuck around a little longer, but who knows? Try singing, dude. There's a reason I don't sing. There's a reason I was a rhythm guitarist and a promoter and not singing. Somewhere there's some audio tape of me doing some Driving and Crying covers. And I have a standing $50 offer for any copy of that tape so that I can burn it. But yeah, not a singer. Not at all. Can troubleshoot them right before the game starts. That is awesome. I will absolutely let Matt know. Heard from the DM. I love it when we can help people find games live on the air and we can make these matches work. That's totally down for it. So where'd you go? I thought the first book was the best. That's usually the case, right? The writer's got a lot of great ideas and has some time to get that first one out. But once the first one's done, now you're suddenly on a time limit to get the second one out, and you used a bunch of your good ideas up already. So now you got to sort of push it to get through the second one. Look, it's not unlike music, right? Everybody's debut album kicks ass because you got 7 years worth of greatest hits of playing in clubs to draw from to get your first album out. And you want all your strongest material on it because you never know if you're going to get a second album. So the number of people that have a kick-ass second album that's better than their first, that's a really short list. Demos, actually, absolutely. Hey, thank you for swinging by as much as you could. Absolutely appreciate you being here. So that's great that you were here, and definitely. So thanks for all of y'all for being able to pop in here. We should be getting pretty close to Mr. Welch popping in here at some point soon. I hope. Well, I'm trying to keep an eye out for him to show up and join the stream here. Where'd we go? Same theory about first albums and songs. Absolutely, dude. That's the theory. There's a very good reason for it. Going beyond some of your favorites from the official content, does anybody have particular favorites from community content? Again, I'm always going to be a huge fan and stand on the table for the guys that do Threshold Magazine. Somebody absolutely ought to hire those guys to do that full time for them somewhere. But curious if folks have a particular fan made something out there that you happen to be a big fan of. Once ran a heist one-off in Glantry City. First, yeah, well, heard of an exploding flying carpet. Usually you get a flying carpet with an attitude, right? They just fly up to about 3,000 feet and just flip, just drop everybody. That's usually how you can sort of screw with those people. So I am curious, what particularly excellent fan-generated content you might have seen out there along the way. Obviously, Glenn's videos are fantastic, and we all love them and would stand on a table for all of those. I love the stuff Threshold Magazine does. I really love that 5th edition player's guide. That thing's great. I'm actually probably going to order a copy or two for some friends for holiday gifts and see what they can do, and see what people are interested in. What do we got here? Playing RPGs on Roll20. Okay. Is that it? Other folks, if you've got preferred platforms, Roll20, Virtual Tabletop Simulator. Some folks are playing just in Discord, right? Just turn the cameras on in Discord and use the dice roller in there, and you're good enough. Because you can share screens in Discord, so you can show some maps if you've already got them digitized. Some people are totally cool just playing right in that space. One of the things that we've done with our digital wargaming conventions that we carried over into the role-playing one as well, it's very tough to sort of force a specific platform for use in a digital convention. That's not the easiest thing to do. And so one of the things that we've said is, hey, if you're willing to volunteer to be a DM or a GM, you go with the platform you're most comfortable with, because that's the thing that's going to give the best game to the player. If you're having to sit there and fiddle with the technology because it's new to you, because somebody forced you into something you're not comfortable with, it's not a great way to go. So let's you tell us what you want to use, and we'll have the players have to adjust to fit to that. See what you get out of that. What do we got? Use Discord in our 2 Mystara campaigns. Yeah, some folks, it absolutely does work wonderfully. What else we got? Jeff, when you're talking about never mind something being closed, I'm curious what it is that's closed on you. Just because don't know. Just sort of a stray reference there. Where'd we go? Victor's running Black Rose. Victor is running Black Rose. So he is doing that. Y'all, excuse me here. Folks, in North Carolina, it's a copper line. It is pretty good. It's not necessarily that it's all that thick or all that hearty. It's that I haven't had anything to eat since like 2:00 this afternoon. So by the time we're done here, I'm going to be a little loopy. Even with just one beer, I'm a cheap date. I totally am. Absolutely get that. What do we got? Foundry and Map Tool are nice. Yeah, no kidding. As a guy who's worked in IT project management a bunch, that coding, everybody said, just code it up yourself. No, there's a little more to it than that. That's not the easiest thing to be doing there. So, let me also just throw out there, if folks have questions about the convention as a whole, like I'm the dude to ask. So if you've got questions on those things, feel free to throw it out there. Where'd we go? Tried to find it, posted the link when I tried the it's already concluded. I got you. That's already been concluded. Hey, guess what we've got, folks? He is now here. He has now joined us. How you doing, Mr. Glenn?
Dinny Mevel Sherad Susnig. Oh, never mind. This is an English chat.
Yeah. So
work decided that I needed to stay late.
Yeah, well, I am glad you're here because I've been rambling for an hour, and I'm pretty sure people are sick of hearing me. So we'll let them get sick of hearing somebody else for a bit. So But no, Mr. Welch is here with us. He is half the brain trust behind this, and had a lot of the idea for, hey, a MystaraCon would be really cool. Let's focus on something like this, and let's get the community involved. And I was crazy enough to say, sure, let's try it, and here we are. I'm going to go ahead and fill us up on the screen here a little bit. So, Mr. Welch, do want to ask a couple of questions for you, just because we've talked about it with the audience. What was your first Mystara product? What was your introduction to the setting?
Drums on Fire Mountain on
Okay.
sale. KB Toys, $1 in Corpus Christi. I was on vacation.
I'm curious how many of our audience is old enough to remember KB Toys. So
it went away about 20 years ago. So anybody, 30 would probably remember.
Yeah, perhaps. So $1 modules, though, I think is
they were unloading them. I even took back. I had bought AC/DC Highway to Hell, and I saw all the modules for like $1. So I ran back, took the tape back, and took the money and spent it on the $1 modules.
There you go. So Drums on Fire Mountain was your introduction to Mystara, and you've been in love with it ever since. You've sort of stuck with it ever since.
Well, yeah, it was on sale.
Yeah.
And then I started, I was very young at that point. So stuff on sale was more attractive to me. Plus, this was, back then it was Mystara or Greyhawk, and Dragonlance had not quite hit yet.
Yeah, Dragonlance was 84, I think, is when that one first rolled out.
Yeah, well, they weren't $1 to start with. They were clearancing them because TSR was making too much.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So, I think one of the things that a lot of folks are probably curious about, and then we're just going to open it up to questions from the crowd for you. But talk to us a little bit about the video series. Sort of, why did you get started with this, and what is it that keeps you coming back? And when you first started to where you are now, what are some of the lessons you've learned about the video series, and things you'd like to continue doing or do a little different as the video series rolls forward?
Well, I started the video series because I was looking at all the major D&D guys and all the lore channels. They're just for Forgotten Realms. There is no dedicated lore channel that puts out anything on a regular basis for Greyhawk, Spelljammer, Planescape. There's Hour of the Raven, which I've collabed with for Ravenloft, but he's it. I'm like, somebody needs to talk about Mystara and talk about the old modules. Because I was looking at a review for Rahazia, and there wasn't one. So I just started okay, this is how the setting works, and this is all the different gazetteers and all the different nations. And I started covering all the modules. And then once I ran out of modules and everything else, I started going into what was could have been where it could be, and then looking at the little obscure stuff and then filling in the details. And I was an editor for many moons, and Mystara is not exactly the pinnacle of cohesive storytelling. Ravenloft Travel Agent hasn't posted in 8 months because I reached out to both of them, and her channel's dead, unfortunately. But so there's so many continuity problems, and I called them out. And using my own creativity, I started cementing the continuity problems together, shaving stuff down. And a huge chunk of the continuity was because Bruce was supposed to be the line editor, but there was no continuity editor. If you want to write something for Forgotten Realms, you got to run it by Ed Greenwood. If you wanted to write something for Mystara, you just had to get it approved. So there's a lot of continuity stuff. There was like when Gazetteer 7 came on and said, hey, let's add actual Norse immortals. It's like, okay, that doesn't mesh with anything, and it's never mentioned again.
Yeah.
Other problems they have is they will bring up a really good idea, and then nobody else will pick up the idea. Nephews, who did Tall Tales of the Wee Folk, introduced us with all this information about the Fae Court.
Yep.
And they're only ever mentioned once in another module in the Hollow World, which was coincidentally written by Nephew. There's no mention of Serain outside of anything outside of they just tossed out continuity completely. There's no mention of Serain outside of Top Ballista. There's no mention of Aqua Rindi outside of Sea Peoples. And though Night Howlers does get heavily mentioned in the Glantry box set.
So I wonder if one of the issues there, though, was like the Fae Court from Tall Tales of the Wee Folk. There weren't a whole lot of products that were even on the drawing board beyond that one to come back around to mention them, to use them for anything, though.
No.
You mentioned Night Howlers reappeared in Glantry, but that Glantry was one of maybe a half dozen products that actually appeared after Night Howlers. Yeah. There just weren't very many products for those things to ever show up in, were there?
Yeah. When second edition came along, that completely ruined the Mystara line, because they were told TSR's nuke phase, where everybody got a Holocaust, was detrimental to pretty much every line except for Greyhawk.
Yeah.
And Mystara was no exception, and we got it bad. Like you get rid of Alfheim, and then you get rid of Alphatia, and you get rid of most of the villains. And after that, there's no conflict. Anybody that tries to invade somebody else gets stomped into the ground. Thyatis fails to invade the Isle of Dawn. Ethengar fails to invade the Helden Freeholds. Anytime somebody tries to get aggressive, they're going to lose. And that was a major problem with second edition. And then they came out with Red Steel, and Red Steel was an absolute continuity mess. With when I was I asked Bruce about it. It was like, how come you've got the player's guide mentions the spread of the red curse is all over, and then the DM's guide restricts the red curse to just the baronies? And he goes, oh, that's because the two different people worked on the different books and they never talked to each other.
Somehow not surprising.
Yeah.
I will say, so the Apocalypse did come to Greyhawk also with the Greyhawk Wars box set.
Yeah.
And
I have a mint condition Greyhawk, still in shrink.
Yeah. And so Greyhawk did have its big Apocalypse moment. I think the big difference there, where you didn't really notice it much, is there's like one product for Greyhawk that got released after Greyhawk Wars. And they just
from the ashes
the line altogether.
And the Greyhawk one wasn't. It knocked some nations on their ass, but Planescape got rid of the entirety of the faction system. Mm-hmm. Which, you take that out, that's not Planescape anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Spelljammer was already dead by then. Everybody has a soft spot for Spelljammer, but Spelljammer did not sell well, and it did not last very long as a setting.
Yeah.
The rules were just bad. And they will freely admit that. Forgotten Realms had, I don't know how many Holocausts they've had. I think they're up to 7 now. And then Greyhawk had the war. Dark Sun got rid of I forget whether they had like the gladiators started to take over, so the slave rebellion was finished. And that was strange. Yeah. It was like, okay, we're now not Mad Max. Now we're we're kind of like Rome stuff.
That probably was just a change in the people running the product.
Oh yeah.
And so the vision behind them changed. We did mention during the first hour before you were able to pop in here, when we were talking specifically about Wrath of the Immortals, but as applied to some other things, that time frame in the role-playing industry as a whole, not just TSR, but the late 80s, early 90s, especially the early 90s into the mid 90s, a lot of the major settings had these big meta plots that were extended across multiple products across a long series of time that fundamentally changed the game worlds in which the games were set. Another example of that was the Harlequin Adventure series for Shadowrun.
Yeah.
And not Harlequin like the trashy romance novels, like
No,
Harlequin,
the character.
circus clowns. Yeah. That had a dramatic change to the entire setting for Shadowrun. Torg, the role playing in the Alternity Wars there. That one, the interesting thing about the meta plot that one is it wasn't just the meta plot as the players were experiencing it. They actually had feedback forms in all the products that at the end of all of those adventures, you could send your outcomes into West End Games, and they aggregated all of those different outcomes that they received across multiple players to decide what was happening next in the game world. So what you reported from your game actually affected how the series was developing beyond that, which was, it's an interesting way to do it. I won't say it was necessarily successful because West End Games isn't around anymore, but it was a neat way. It was certainly it was a science project worth trying. I'll say it.
Yeah. And the meta plot isn't, it's gotten a bad reputation because too many games wrote themselves into a corner. Shadowrun being the glaring exception. I'll give it to the guys that did Shadow. The guys at FASA, when they wrote their meta plot, they looked at it and said, okay, how do we not write ourselves into the corner? So you had all the guys like, okay, so this is what's going to happen. It's going to change a few rules, but we're not going to nuke the world. Vampire had a meta plot, nuked the world. And then Deadlands famously nuked their world. And then
Deadlands was a little bit of an odder case, though, because Deadlands was several of the original partners and creators all sort of walking away from the company while they were all still friends. And it figured if they nuked it all on their way out the door, that nobody would really completely mess it up coming back in behind them. And that happened anyway. But that one wasn't just a game related thing. There were some interpersonal dynamics related to Deadlands as well.
Yeah. And you had one problem, especially during the 90s, was everything had to have a CCG tie-in. And that caused an enormous amount of problems. It hurt 7th Sea because suddenly you had to have books that were focused on the card game. Deadlands focused on the card game. Cyberpunk, actually released a really good card game that sadly died too young. And only released one book that was tied to the card game, but it was actually a really good book because they were writing about a really good card game. Fortunately, they didn't do the Spelljammer, though they didn't tie it into not Spelljammer, Spellfire. Yeah, though they did tie in Planescape to the Blood War RPG or the CCG rather.
Yeah.
So. They tried to get the meta plot, but the problem with Mystara was they got rid of all the tension. The Cold War was gone. Yeah. One of the empires was destroyed. The other one was, ravaged by war. So then where does that leave everybody else? Well, they do whatever they want, but everybody either does nothing and prospers or never gets mentioned again. I think when I was talking to Anne for the Yalarum book, after they kick it to the almanacs, Yalarum's only mentioned 3 times in all of the almanacs total.
Wow.
Nothing happens to them because it was the choose your own adventure module. The Etrugan get mentioned twice, but the Etrugan had their own problems.
Yeah.
Everything happens in Karamikos, or you've got everything bad happening to Thyatis, but most of the nations don't get mentioned because they didn't have an idea how to write them.
Well, and I wonder if some of that wasn't also built around trying to reset the settings some that you could restart at a low level and bring new characters along at a low level, because if you've got first, second, third, fourth level characters that aren't essentially cannon fodder for world changing events, it's a lot easier to find adventures for those level characters in a world where the stakes are much smaller. And I don't know if that was necessarily intentionally what they were trying to do, but I wonder if that's sort of a subconscious thing of what they were playing with.
That's kind of the way, yeah, that's kind of the way they wrote it. Plus, you had the lesser modules, Irindi, Yalarum, Etrugan, where there was nothing to work with. They didn't even they never even mentioned until the 1010 Almanac. They never mentioned the name of the leader of Yalarum at all.
Yeah,
like you had to scroll down to it, and it's like, okay, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? I don't know. And he's actually boring because he never makes any decisions.
Yeah,
and that was and then the Etrugan was a mess. That's why I rewrote the whole damn thing.
I think one of the things that we're finding here, and this, somebody could probably extract this from your videos, but I think what we need is a definitive Mystaran pronunciation guide published.
Yeah,
that you might need to slip that into your next book. We need the definitive pronunciation guide.
That'll be controversial because no, it's not.
Well, because how many different ways can people pronounce Karamikos, Karamikos, Karamikos?
According to my artist, who is Greek, it is Karamikos.
Yeah,
that is a Greek name, and that is how a Greek name would be pronounced.
Yeah,
and
but that said, it's not Greek; it's sort of Polish Lithuanian from the 1300s. So
yeah,
it's
no, he is from what would be the equivalent of the Byzantium Empire.
Yeah,
because he is Corindan. He is not native to Trollodara.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of them, and it's like Thaddeus, stuff like that.
Victor, grab one for me while you're at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it covers some of the nations, but how much bigger has Mystara gotten since then that we need more definitive pronunciation features there. So
and there's a lot to fill
in on the dialect.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, what part of Mystara would Conan be from? Let me see. The redheaded guy, he's probably from Darrican, though he's Canadian, so that also makes him from Norworld.
I think he's talking the barbarian, not the talk show-arian.
Oh, okay. They do have Hyperborea over in Scothar, though it was it was taken from Blackmoor. And that was the thing. Is actually when you talk about Mystara, when you're trying to talk to people, you've got 4 different settings, and that's something different from a lot of the other ones. Though the Red Steel had problems, and the Hollow World had problems too. Because they threw out all this stuff and then never really did anything with it.
Yeah. Hollow World was clearly an attempt to sort of graft historical, much more definitive historical themes onto, onto the fantasy world, even more so than the regular part of Mystara did.
Yeah. And let's kick it to the Bronze Age.
Success,
Yeah, and then we'll kick it to the Bronze Age, and until they bring in the pirates with the gunpowder.
Yeah, no kidding. It wasn't a bad concept, as you've noted. There were some continuity issues that needed some cleanup. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But as a concept, it was a defensible concept. It wasn't an issue there. I think there was definitely some screwiness in the way in which some of the things got pasted together.
Yeah.
But over time, I think a lot of those sort of rough seams got smoothed out a bit. But you mentioned, kind of 4 settings in one a little bit there between the primary Mystara stuff, the Red Steel stuff, the Hollow World stuff, some of the old Blackmore stuff. Truthfully, like Forgotten Realms kind of did that as well, because you had the core Forgotten Realms stuff, but then you had the Aztec themed stuff pasted onto it.
Yeah.
You had all the Oriental Adventure stuff sort of tacked onto one side of the continent there somewhere. So it's not like Mystara was the only one to have that done to it.
No.
I think part of what hurt Mystara relative to some of the others was, unless you know where it came from, if you just look at the box for Red Steel on the shelf, you got no idea that it's actually tied into Mystara at all. So,
and the other I was going to say the other thing with Forgotten Realms is, they had all these settings until 5th edition, and then it became the Sword Coast and only the Sword Coast.
Yeah. Which
is actually some of the more popular ones when people ask me to convert the 5th edition modules to Mystara. A lot of people not happy with the Forgotten Realms right now.
Yeah, I've stayed away from a bit of that. I've got more than enough old classic material to keep me busy till the day I die. And unless people start coming out with new official Mystara stuff, I just don't see myself picking up a whole lot of other new stuff that's floating around out there. It's just not all that interesting to me. And it's part of it is a little bit of the rule setting piece. I'm unlikely to play much other than Beckme for the rest of my life. Maybe some 2nd edition stuff, because I got a lot of friends that play it. I'm one of those weirdos. Like, I don't everybody immediately hang up and log out of this or anything. I enjoyed 4th edition. I had a lot of fun playing 4th edition. Part of it was I had a really good DM here locally. I enjoyed the hell out of 4th edition. I really thought it was an underrated game. I will absolutely agree with the folks that say the problem with 4th edition was that it wasn't truly Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not going to argue with you about that one at all. I can agree with that. But as a game, it was a fun game to play.
Well,
all the people I had to play 4th edition with have all moved on to other things. So,
for a lot of people, it came across more like Warhammer Quest or similar games.
Yeah, I had in 2007. Right before 4th edition came out, I was writing for a different website back then, one that's long since given up the ghost. And I actually had an hour sit down with a couple of the guys who were honcho in 4th edition at Gen Con. We were able to arrange a 1-hour sit down with those guys. Again, I was there for one day, so I kind of fit in what I could. And one of the things that I took away from that interview with them was that they were absolutely making some significant changes to the rules of D&D to sort of force people into some of the things they were already kind of doing anyway. But by codifying them the way they did, it was almost sort of a video game on the tabletop, is really how it came across. And I get why. Like, I'm not going to debate whether it was a good idea or bad idea. I understand why it was the idea. It just, I left that interview kind of shaking my head a little bit going, this is really going to piss off a lot of people. And it did. Coming out of it, what came out of it wasn't a bad game. It just wasn't what I think a lot of people wanted D&D to be. And
they wanted,
it's closer to that.
Dungeons and Dragons has always had the problem of falling behind the curve because they would sit on their laurels. It's not just WotC, but it was TSR as well.
Yeah.
TSR for the 2nd edition didn't realize that the people that started the game were starting to become teenagers and young adults, and they wanted to move into something else. And then Vampire took over as the RPG of the time. And then, so when they went to 2nd edition to 3rd edition, they went to 4th edition because they were trying to capture the World of Warcraft. And people still wanted to play in, the traditional 3.5. So Pathfinder came along.
Yeah.
And then Pathfinder overtook 4th edition. And then Wizard said, all right, we'll do 5th edition.
Well, there were some very real business issues with 3rd edition of 4th edition also. And that was relaunching as 4th edition allowed them to get out from underneath the 3rd edition OGL.
Yeah.
And that right there is its own 2-hour show. right? At a minimum.
That did come back to bite him on the ass, though.
But that is its own completely separate entanglement of issues there. That was one of the reasons why they had to hurry up and get 4th edition out, is that the OGL from 3rd edition was making their lives hard. And it wasn't necessarily that it was cutting into anybody's sales. It was that some of the products that were being released under the OGL weren't to a level of quality that WotC was happy that was going to continue to support the game in an intelligent way. It wasn't necessarily it was cannibalizing their sales, but it was making the game kind of look bad. And that didn't help.
The 3.0 OGL plague was a bane to bookstores everywhere. I still remember like rows and rows of OGL titles. Hell, I even worked on one where they was so bad that they kind of took my name off of it because the editor chopped up most of my work. You're gonna find a copy of the complete Paladin from I think it was Red Dragon Press.
Yeah,
you can find it at most used bookstores that still have it for like $1.
There's those $1 products coming back to you again.
Yeah, they wanted $20, and it was just like I was like making all these cool Paladins, and they like, okay, well, we just cut all the good stuff out, and now it's just a bunch of combat bonuses. It's like, and also we didn't like your take. And that was like there's very little in of what I wrote actually in the book anymore.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that happened over the years, you mentioned sort of people migrating away from D&D and to things like the Storyteller System. You know, one of the things that happened over the years, the original D&D stuff, let's face it, it was a war game, right? A lot of role-playing folks are like, oh my God, no, you know, get the silver cross out, keep those war gamers away. It was a war, like Gary Gygax was a war gamer. He has war game design credits on top of his role-playing credits out there. Yeah. That's really where those things came from. It was skirmish level wargaming with character progression, and then they threw some magic on because they thought it'd be kind of fun, and it turned out to be almost its whole new game. And at a certain point, the population of people willing to just sort of war game with character progression, you'd kind of max that population out. Somewhere along the way, somebody realized, hey, you can actually tell some cool stories with this. Here comes the Storyteller System, among others. And you know, the population makes it sound like it's this enormous thing. The gamers started to fragment a little more. I was right in the middle of it all. Look, I've straddled both sides of the war game role-playing divide my entire life. I've been an adventure gamer the entire time. A good friend of mine refers to us as gaming omnivores, right? We're willing to consume whatever. That's why I run a wargaming site, and I'm here helping co-sponsor a role-playing convention. When that schism happened, you had certain people that were like, oh my God, I'm a role-playing guy, don't ever come near me with a war game. And you had other folks that were, oh my God, I'm a war gamer, don't ever come near me with those role-playing things. And really there's a lot of middle ground there that you know, the shouty people don't want to acknowledge, but absolutely does exist. And that's how you end up with things like X10, right? The war game that's passed off as a role-playing module. So you know, that's sort of what it is. So, including the Book of Nod. I'm sure that's an interesting read.
Yeah, that was when they were trying to branch out into like a lot of props for the live action stuff. It's actually not a gaming supplement. It was I had a copy somewhere. I don't know who stole it. But it was like a bunch of collections of lore and legend for the vampire setting. I tried to get, you know, I kept people into Mystara, and the problems we've had getting it into it is too many people. There's no easy way to say this. There are a collection of people that believe that if you write about real world cultures, that makes you a bad person, especially in a role-playing game. They do not like allegory, which similar to J.R.R. Tolkien, but they don't have the talent of Tolkien either. I did have people tell me that they had problems with the Etruscan, they had problems with the Ethengar, He's like, like, well, you're not Mongolian. You can't write about Mongolians. Like, I can write about anything I want to.
Yeah.
And that's one problem with 5th edition is people keep throwing the current day, and Mystara is very classic, but it's also about the journey from nobody to somebody. And that was something Mystara did more than anyone else. Birthright, you start off at the top of the food chain. Mystara, you start off with basics, or you're going through dungeons, and you get to expert, and you're hacking through the wilderness, and you get to companion, and there's like, hey, we need you to take care of this area for us. And then you get to master, which was horribly set up with where instead of they were supposed to be triapsing through the multiverse on their way to immortality, and then they say, okay, well, here's 4 interconnected modules about the god Alphax, or the immortal Alphax.
Yeah.
And that's Mystara, though. It's the hero's journey. And if you follow along that, that's what Beckme was for, though 36 levels was a bit much to do that in. But other settings, it's hard to do that. Or other editions. 5th edition does not do high level excuse me.
Yeah.
High level play. Getting over a head cold or a chest cold, rather.
As long as nobody's listening on headphones, they're probably okay.
Yeah, I'm also leaning back from the mic when I cough. And getting people into Mystara is easy because you're playing the stereotypes. Yeah. You're the Scottish Highlander. You're the German knight. You're the Roman centurion. If you want to be a Viking skald, that's there for you. It's easy for you to, teach people how to play this because it's partially grounded in reality.
Well, because there's tons of movies that you can point to and go, you're that guy.
Yes. If you want to, you're going to play from Minrathad. Okay. Well, here's a Pirates of the Caribbean, and you're kind of that guy over there. It's like you've got all the historical stuff, and they can play what they want. And you got the high fantasy elements too. But I think the one that gave me the most grief was introducing the Toa Makai, which was I was trying to fill out the Irindi book because that's probably the second worst gazetteer. And he's like, okay, what about Maori warriors? It's like, that's great. Yeah. It's like, oh, you can't do that. You're putting the wrong tattoos on her, and you can't show nipples because this is 5th edition time. Why can't I show nipples? Because it's bad. Nipples are bad. And then when I released the book, the one thing that people told me that they liked the best was all the blood and nipples. And there was only 2 nipples. And there was 2 pixelated nipples if you wanted to squint. But people like to play that. We ran, I don't know how many games we ran through, especially during the playtest. And, some of the characters that I tried to change, people kept because it was easier for them to grasp the concept. And that's the appeal of Mystara. That's why it's still going on 30 years later, 40 years later. Don't get me started on the head to toe Victorian 5th edition.
Yeah.
You've got so much stuff you can do. Still working on the Dungeon Master's Guide. Hopefully having some new art, but that's been slow going because the guy that I paid for the art is a very, very popular artist in Europe and has been working on his first graphic novel.
Don't get too far ahead of us. You got to talk about the Dungeon Master Guide and the Player's Guide in your talk tomorrow, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, it's like this is what people want to see when they want to see Mystara. I'm not going into any details.
Yeah.
But that's partially why Mystara was relevant when it was in Beckme, and it's relevant now it's in 5th edition. Because it's generally considered, most people don't even know about it. You go to the different boards, and it's Forgotten Realms because that's the only thing that Wizards is pushing. Well, now they're pushing Ravenloft, kind of, and Eberron, because Baker is a man of what they describe John Wick as, a man of purpose. It's like,
Sure.
yeah, Baker is very much a man of determination and drive.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get it too, but I spent 6 years waiting for Mystara to come back, and instead of just a throwaway line here and there. And the setting has kept people going. I mean, you look at the vaults, and there's like, I don't know, 40,000 articles. And they keep adding dozens more every month. And there was just so many different ways to play it. If you wanted to play low tech, low magic, you just go to the areas without a lot of magic. If you wanted to play high magic, you go to Alphatia or Glantry and hope they don't murder you. Because Glantry loves capital punishment. It's their national pastime.
Yeah. Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, over the next couple of days, we mentioned, I mentioned, not having Glenn spill too much of the beans about the 5th edition guides, both the player's guide that's out that we looked at a few minutes ago before he got here, and then also the DM's guide. We were kissing up to you a bit before you got here, talking about what a great product the 5th edition player's guide is. Pulled a little bit of it up on screen. Tomorrow at 11 Eastern, 10 Central, math for your own local time zone. Glenn's back with a couple of the artists, right? Or is it one of the writers?
Yes. No, I was the only writer except for Marco, who unfortunately I was unable to get a hold of.
Okay.
Marco donated the entirety of the Codex Immortalis, which I then had to chop down to make it fit. But he was the only other writer that was involved.
Okay. So tomorrow at 11, we're going to be talking a bunch about those 5th edition books and bringing Mystara into the current era of D&D. So folks that have questions about sort of how did this come together? What are some of the specific things you did? How those rules conversions happen? There's an entire panel set aside tomorrow to do exactly that. Folks that are curious about the vaults and wanting to know a little more about the vaults, how they came to be, what they're like now, how they're running. We've got Sean on the show on Sunday at noon Eastern. Do the math for your local time zone. Sean is here on Sunday, and we'll be doing a whole talk. We'll be talking the vaults then. On Saturday morning, again, morning U.S. time, do the math for wherever you are. It's around lunchtime for those of you in Europe. It'll be dinner time for our guest. Thorf is going to be joining us from where he is in Japan, and he is obviously he's the cartographer of Mystara, right? He is the map making god of Mystara, and he will be joining us on the show tomorrow morning as we're presenting this right now. Thorf will also be back tomorrow evening along with Glenn and others for Bruce Hurd's appearance here. And so we've actually got Bruce has committed to coming to join us for a couple hours and talk about the glory days of Mystara, as well as the stuff he's doing now with Kaladar. So we've got a variety of panels that we were able to pull together for you guys. I hope y'all have a lot of fun with them. It's a good chance to have that conversation and interact with folks that, we're all here because we all love Mystara and want to keep it going as long as we possibly can.
That's actually one of the things that attracted a lot of the artists that I worked with was the early Mystara art. Some of it was awful.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if anybody's ever seen the original art for the Malfera from originally from the Master of the Desert Nomad series, but that's what got Rubus on board when he got the opportunity to redraw the elephant demon to make it look scary rather than like a Wednesday Addams plush toy.
Well, if you go through the old, if you go through the WotC D&D Art and Arcana book and go look at the evolution of the purple worm from its original appearance on the cover of the monster manual in the in the late 70s up through what it is now in the monstrous compendiums, it is a very different animal as it has evolved over the years.
Yeah, they did that with the Beholder as well. If anybody hasn't seen Eye of the Beholder, I think it's on Netflix. That is a mandatory watch if you like D&D, because you get to listen to the stories behind the surviving members of the Four Horsemen. And they actually tell you a lot about, they actually mention a lot about what happened with Mystara towards the 90s, where the TSR gave up on gave up on a lot of settings. They wanted Mystara and Greyhawk gone.
Well, I think part of that had to do with the fear that it was cannibalizing some of their own sales. I think part of it probably had to do with who some of the rights holders might have been or might have been perceived to have been, and there might have been a little bit of preemptive lawsuit insurance going on by doing certain things to stay out of the way.
Yeah, well, they wanted they Dragonlance was going strong, and Forgotten Realms, I think that was the start of Drizzt, and they wanted to shift towards Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance, and everything else had to go. Though they did introduce Planescape, but Zeb Cook is a master game designer.
Yeah,
and they were looking for new ways because they had overstretched themselves.
Yeah, just so we can go ahead and scare everybody here real quick, we're gonna pull up.
Yes, there it is. Malfera.
Just in case anybody wanted to think that it might not have actually been that bad. No, it was that bad. There you go. So it was definitely that bad. So in this case, Google is only sort of your friend. It returns an accurate search result. It's just not something you necessarily wanted to see.
Yeah, if you search for it, if you do search for it, you can see Rubus's new version, and it's he kind of outdid himself for that one. That was actually his and when we were talking about new art for Mystara, and it's like, what do you want to do? And I was like reading off all the monsters that needed to have new art done. And it's like, well, we've got the Brain Collector. I was like, you've got the Weird would be nice. And it's like, you got the draw, and he goes, what's that? And he goes, it's a Frankenstein dragon. It's like, you had me at Frankenstein dragon. So there's a lot of monsters that really need a new love because, well, they were great monsters.
TSR actually did that for themselves at one point. The original Goristro was introduced in a Dragon magazine article years and years ago, but then finally actually got a good treatment once Planescape rolled around, and they used it as one of the demons in Planescape. But as it originally appeared in Dragon magazine, 15 years earlier, 10 years earlier, whatever it was, it was a bit of a yawn. It really wasn't all that cool or scary or anything. So there you go. Proof that wizards need restraint. Yeah. It's one of those cases of just because you could do something didn't mean you should do something. That was definitely the case there.
And then one day, if I'm ever bored again, granted, I wrote the majority of the Etrugan book when I was trapped by a hurricane, when my neighborhood was flooded out by Harvey. And maybe if I'm ever flooded out again, I can actually start working on Yalarum or Irendi, because that's what people have asked for the retcon. And there is huge chunks of Mystara that kind of do need to be retconned. Even if you don't go past the 1000 timeline, or you go to like a different timeline like I do, people, the best way I can say it, or what the inspiration was what they did with the 40K RPGs, where they took a deliberately vague game world and started adding stuff to it in the Fantasy Flight games. Yeah. And they became masterpieces, to the point of I'm still looking for a copy of Faith and Coin for under $400. And I was trying to do that with Mystara, where I think it was it was Havard's idea to give Baron von Hendrix a family, or not give him a family, but change his motivation for him rather just evil for evil's sake.
Yeah.
And people fell in love with that idea. You add tension, you give them decent villains, you flesh out the storyline. Like one of the ideas we had for Alphatia was the primary conflict with Alphatia is that Ariadne needs an heir. Xandar is the heir. Xandar's an idiot. He's an incompetent idiot at that. So she needs to find another heir. And one of the thoughts was her son that's the hostage in Thyatos he gets married and he has a kid that shows magical talent. So now you've got a 5-year-old that's being threatened by his uncle, and it added tension. We didn't change anything. We just added to the story. You can't go too far from the base of the story before you change the story. That's a major problem it's a major problem with a lot of people that try to retcon stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is something that, but when you change things, when you slightly not alter them, but when you add to it, you flesh out the story, you keep what people originally liked and you give them more of it.
Yeah.
And people don't want, they want to play with the same heroes, but they want to play in new adventures with the same heroes.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things you can do there is that you can add nuance to existing characters, but you don't want to overhaul them to where you fundamentally change them.
Right.
And so Baron von Hendrix is just evil. Baron von Hendrix appears as evil to you because he's doing these other things that you may not be aware of. All right, that's some nuance. He's still evil for my characters trying to do things, but now there's a reason behind it that if odd nuanced decisions present themselves in the game, we've got a reason why von Hendrix might go one way versus the other. And I think that's something that does make a difference. So, putting nuance into stuff isn't overhauling things. And I don't even think that's necessarily much of a major retcon, but as you've noted, there are places where the setting does need retconning. There are definitely some places where it could use that.
And just flesh things out. And they leave. There's an argument for keeping things vague, which lets the players flesh things out, or the DMs to flesh things out. But the more hooks you give them, the more they can pull people in.
Yeah.
And that's for some modules. I mean, the Five Shires was written by Ed Greenwood, who also did the module Endless Stairs, which I think on my list of the top 10 worst Mystara modules, that was number 1. The man can write exposition. So there's not a lot of things to explore in the Five Shires. For people looking for that, something like that, it's not the best book. But for people who love a lot of, like they want to read this module like it's a book, it's great.
Yeah.
You have to find the balance. And Mystara tends to go into one direction or the other, and they never meet halfway. Yalarum literally was fill in the blank. If you wanted to, is the Vizier good? Okay, maybe. Is the Sultan good? Maybe. What's in the capital? I don't know. Here's this little village. Where's the village on the map? We didn't place it.
What do you need it to be?
Yeah. So you've got 20 major cities with just a name. You don't give us any information on anyone leading it. You don't give us any major NPCs. You don't tell us anything. So we can fill that out. Well, that's basically writing the module with extra steps.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, why am I buying the module from you when I have to do all the work myself anyway?
Yeah. Glantry kind of had the same thing where you've got all these major cities and all these provinces, but they don't talk about the Glantry city itself. Yeah. Granted, it's, just how messed up that setting was, or that nation was, keeps it fresh. Glantry is probably the one nation outside maybe Karamikos that non-Mystara players recognize.
Yeah. I think there's, well, you mentioned the idea behind sort of reading it more like a book versus necessarily playing in the game, and what's that balance in between. I'll tell you, being the big Mystara fan that I was, and being in many cases the only Mystara fan wherever I was, I spent a lot of time reading them like books just as much as I did trying to find any sort of gaming material out of them. So the fact that you had longer exposition in different places bothered me not in the least. I was totally down with that. I was fine reading some of it. And that was one of the things I loved about the Gazetteers, is that it was, look, this was the social studies textbook of each of these realms. And to me, that was great. I really enjoyed digging into that level of detail in those places, because that was the kind of stuff that I liked reading, whether it was Mystara or any others. I just happen to like the Mystara setting better than most of the others. So even a lot of like the FRE series, I think it was, for the Forgotten Realms, where they took different chunks of the realms and tried to basically replicate the Gazetteer idea in the Forgotten Realms. I enjoyed reading some of those. I didn't always enjoy the Forgotten Realms modules, but I didn't enjoy the Forgotten Realms setting books near as much as I did the Mystara ones.
Yeah, sadly, the Mystara novels were lacking.
Yes,
I had to. When I reviewed those, that was a labor of love. But my ex got me the Dragon Lord series, and I couldn't finish it. It's like, does anything actually exciting happen?
Yeah.
Because it's but that was, I guess, when TSR was just cranking out the novels. And because I actually inherited a bunch of Ravenloft modules, and it's like, okay, I found the formula. It's on page 3.
Well, and one of the things that I think might have served Mystara a little better from a book standpoint was, rather than try and force 2 and 3 and 4 book series together, if they'd taken an approach similar to what they did with the Harpers in the Forgotten Realms, where they had this overarching organization that was the thread that tied a lot of stories together. But otherwise, these were all distinct individual books about particular people in those organizations or within that realm, that setting, that whatever. You've got a line of one-shots that all have some underlying shared setting characteristics, but there's no need to sort of drag things out unnecessarily just to get some stories out. That might have worked better for Mystara. We'll never know, right? It was 20-something years ago. So,
yeah. And, Thorin Gunnarsson. Yeah, he was... I never found out who the actual author was. That was a pen name.
There's a reason that nobody wants you to find out who that author was.
They had one writer quit in the middle of one of the books and replace it with another writer, and like, that never ends well.
Yeah.
You
can probably tell.
Yeah, they were that bad. The first one, there was the first of the Dragon Mage series. There's no conflict. You never have any. You don't fear that the main character is in danger, and then he gets his power armor suit that he finds from the Blackmoor cave and goes and beats up a bunch of dragons, but they don't describe the action very well. And he was almost to the point of being a Mary Sue. Everybody told him how special he was because he looked different, and then spoilers, he turns out to be a polymorph dragon, but they telegraphed that so badly that it's like, okay, yep, and you're a dragon. And you're a dragon. Okay, admit you're a dragon. Okay, come on, we know you're a dragon. Oh, okay, I'm a dragon. Okay, yep, guessed it.
Glad you caught up with us there.
Yeah. But there was a lot of stuff they could do. I mean, if they would have written the novels, one problem with the novels was they just introduced new characters and new concepts that were never mentioned again. The one where all the magic was being stolen from some extraplanar race. okay, this kind of goes against everything that was already previously written. It's like, yeah, but now we're like taking people and like stealing their magic from them. It's like, okay, that's kind of new. That's in fact that's so new that like they never mention it at Glantry. They never mention it anywhere.
Yeah.
But I will say that a lot of the players really appreciate that Mystara does break away from the traditional D&D magic types because of the stable magic and the fact that magic is like a science and that's still being investigated and still being researched.
Well, I think Mystara was one of the very few realms that even tried to explain how those sorts of phenomenon were manifesting themselves in the world. Nobody in Forgotten Realms is trying to explain where magic came from. Nobody in Eberron was trying to explain where magic came from. But through the Immortals and the crash spaceship leaking alien technology and whatever else, whether they did a good job of it or not, they at least made the attempt. That Mystara tried to explain those things, and it's again not that they necessarily did a good job of it, but that they tried made the setting feel a bit more coherent instead of just okay, magic exists because it exists, right? Let's try and explain how we got here. So,
and then I don't think anybody even remembers the Abelet magic theft anymore.
Yeah. Nate, thank you. Just
thanks, Nate.
Quickly, have a good evening.
Yeah, Forgotten Realms kind of brought about the weave, and then they tried to shove it down everybody's throat. And that's one of the reasons why in my continuity series, I had to create the Great Barrier to explain why Mystara is different from everybody else.
Yeah.
Which actually works out because then we become kind of a fantasy Australia where we're isolated and everything evolves differently. You know, our gnolls are different, our kobolds are different, our dragons are different.
We have turtles.
Yes, we had turtles first. Give it back, you bastards. Okay.
But I mean, those larger cosmological issues, I don't know what value is gained in trying to tackle them, in trying to stitch Mystara into some sort of larger multiverse alongside Eberron and Dark Sun and Forgotten Realms and Ravenloft. Like, who cares? Like, why can't it just be its own thing? Why can't it just stand on its own out there and do its own thing? And here is a place in which you can set a whole lot of your adventures, and you don't have to teleport from Mystara into the Forgotten Realms. You can just be in Mystara, and it's just there. And it let it be its own thing. There's no reason you need to tie it into everything else. And that is a little frustrating to me. Just let it be its own thing. It doesn't have to be a part of a whole. So
I'm guessing money is the answer.
Oh, yeah. It always is, you know.
Yeah, but they had some Planescape, which again was probably the best written series of any D&D setting. Mm-hmm. They introduced Mystara in a wonderful way where they like some shadow elf stumbles into the city of doors. And it was just like he didn't know where he was, and then somebody kidnaps him and splits him into 17 different people, and they're all a different member of the factions. And it was an interesting story, though it was only Mystara tangentially. But one of the funniest things in the paragraph I always send people when they're trying to figure out the difference between immortals and gods, the box set for Karamikos, for whatever reason, they have a sidebar that's set in sigil. Yes, it's sigil. It's hard G. If I say it's sigil, the Planescape people get onto me. Yeah, and there's a throwaway sidebar that it's a guy from Mystara talking to a guy from Forgotten Realms about their clerics, and the guy from Forgotten Realms is talking about how they have to do all this for the gods, and they have to appease the gods, and you have to watch out for the gods and all this stuff. And the guy from Mystara goes, "What's a god?"
Yeah,
and it's like, well, you don't have gods? I've never even heard of a god. It's like, what do you have? Like, well, we got, what are gods? And it's like, well, there are these all powerful creatures that, demands worship and sacrifice and interfere in the world. Like, what's an immortal? What's an all powerful creature that, wants to be worshipped and, it's like, and sometimes demands sacrifice, but otherwise leaves you the hell alone. It's like, I like your immortals more than our gods. But that was the thing when I was writing the continuity solving stuff, or the fixing the continuity errors, and I'm for whatever reason, a throwaway joke I made about the King Oberon being the self-appointed personal nemesis of Corellian Lorathian kind of became headcanon for just about everybody. And it's like, so yeah, you can tie in, to the multiverse, but you have to explain why the multiverse can't interfere with Mystara too much.
Yeah.
And it works. It's 99% of your modules aren't going to have anything to do with crossover and stuff like that. Though we did have one fun adventure where everybody was playing a different. You had to assemble the MacGuffin of power to stop the big bad, and every player character was from a different setting. So the Mystara, I think it was a Heldonic Knight, found his part of the MacGuffin, and he gets transported to Sigil, where he has to help the others go to their setting and find their part of the MacGuffin. Actually, it was a decent story.
Yeah.
But
everybody gets a chance to play in their own favorite setting sometime.
Yeah, everybody plays in their favorite setting, but everybody has to play a fish out of water in everybody else's setting.
Yeah.
So the cleric, when they have to go to Glantry, and you have to explain to the you have to explain to the cleric of Saint Cuthbert to like lay low.
Yeah.
You're just a fighter with a club. It's like, okay. It's like, and then you go to Dark Sun, and everybody's like, okay, you guys might want to take off the armor. Just letting you know.
Yeah, it's a little warm out here.
Yeah.
So,
but a lot of the most popular Welcome to Mystara is me fixing the continuity issues, or filling in the details.
Yeah.
Because people want a story. The certain things, my most popular video of the last year was just me filling out Fort Doom, expanding on Harvard's idea where the Baron's not evil because he's crazy. He finds his cousin incompetent because his cousin won't help him suppress the western part of Karamikos like he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then we gave him his family, and then they became super popular. We actually have a module where they meet the Baron's daughter, and she is the lawful evil wizard with the 18 charisma. And she was actually hiring the party to go chase down the Iron Ring because she was getting rid of them so she could replace them with her own people. And then we came to the big reveal that she was one of the villains. Nobody cared because she paid well.
I am going to pull up over here just for folks on the off chance somebody doesn't know. Here's Glenn's Welcome to Mystara series of videos, and these started like 10 years ago or something. It's
3.
I thought only it was longer than that.
No, 3 years.
Okay. But hey, we're all the way up to. Come on, scroll me down here. We're well over 100.
I'm at hold on, I can tell you right now.
Scrolling.
Webcast.
Yep, we're up over 200. Come on, people. So if you want to know everything there is to know about Mystara, 253, because the Elven Guard just went up 2 or 3 days ago.
Yep. We are at week 232. So so a little after 4 years, a little more than 4 years.
There you go. So for folks that are interested, look, you can watch one a week and it's going to take you 4 years to get there, or you can watch 3 a day and it'll only take you a couple of months to catch up.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, there you go. Adventure Heroes in a nutshell. Look, plenty of us have been on the job market enough over the last 10 years. That's us in some cases, you know,
Yeah.
in the real world.
And I've still got, actually, I need to add, I have a notebook of all the topics that I've been writing about. And I still got, was it 5, 10, there's 14, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 45. I've got about another year of topics that are written out. And I'm adding one now. Because I try to find obscure OneNote things and write about them. The like in oh god, what was it? There was a mention of the Gnomish Symposium of Supreme Engineers or something like that, and it gets exactly one mention at all. It's never talk. They never talk about it again. So filled that out.
Yeah.
And that's, again, the player characters went kind of overboard because the whole thing with the gnomes was they were trying out more and more questionable weapons to defeat the kobolds that drove them out.
Okay.
So they gave the party some of these weapons to try out on kobolds. And then the characters come back and ask the gnomes if they got any more of that nerve gas. But you guys weren't supposed to side with the gnomes giving you weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Supreme Symposium of Gnomish Syndicates, mentioned in one line and never spoken of again.
Yeah. Gave somebody a hook to build off of. We just never had the time to do it because Mystara was cut short untimely. So,
well, again, it was almost every gazetteer was written by somebody different, and they never talked to each other.
Yeah. There are a few times where it doesn't appear as though they bothered to talk to Bruce either. So,
yeah, he did mention that, but he also, at certain points, from when he told me, is like he was wearing a lot of hats at the same time.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And folks will get to ask Bruce about it some on tomorrow night's show. So we're around 2 hours of this show. I know we only had Glenn for about an hour of it. Thanks, work. Although part of that was probably my fault for some of the timing and scheduling and crossing time zones, and math is hard. But I definitely want to thank the 10, 12, 15 of y'all that have been here for pretty much the whole time, as well as all the other folks that popped in here and there. I think we're going to put the kibosh on happy hour here in a second. Victor's out of canned cocktails, so I mean, we can't go too much farther because he can't put up with us without some alcohol.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to put up with us without some more alcohol. So Glenn, I got to say, first of all, thank you very much for the video series of Keeping Mystara Alive, because it's been a blast for me to go back and watch a lot of these things and relive my connections to Mystara. And so that's been a lot of fun. But then also for being a lot of the inspiration behind, let's get this MystaraCon thing up and running. So finally getting that up and going. So that's great also. None of this happens without the audience that's crazy enough to take the plunge and join us. So definitely big thanks to those guys. There's been a couple of questions from people on schedule issues. The stuff on tabletop.events is the authoritative schedule. Whatever time that says is the time that we're running off of, because we did have some things change after I pulled the extract that's over at the Armchair Dragoons site, and I just hadn't gone back and updated it yet because I was out of time. And at this point, it's kind of not worth the effort because everybody's already in the Discord and a part of the convention. Please, as we've noted elsewhere, don't share the YouTube links to anybody that's not a part of the convention. These are unlisted for a reason, because we want this live interaction like we've had with you guys tonight to be limited to the people that are registered for the convention. So please keep those close hold. After the convention's over, we're going to change these from unlisted to public, and people will be able to find them, and it won't be an issue. But until then, please keep them close hold. Definitely want to do that. So, Glenn, just as we punch out for tonight, any last thoughts you want to leave everybody with here?
No. just when you tell your boss that you need to get home by 6. Well, no, let me say that one. When you get the reputation of being a miracle worker, pretty soon they start expecting more miracles.
Yeah.
And we will talk in detail about the 5th edition and what keeps the game going, and how I was able to defeat RPG.net.
Huzzah! All right. So with that, folks, thank you all very much for coming tonight for Happy Hour. Hope it was happy for everybody, and hope we didn't screw up too many people's dinner plans. And so we'll see folks tomorrow again, starting early tomorrow. Victor's got a 6 a.m. Eastern game, but we've got other stuff at more reasonable non-vampire hours for those of you in the U.S. and and quite a few panels and talk shows for everyone to pop in and be a part of. So hang out in the Discord, keep an eye on what's going on there. You never know what's going to pop up over the next day and a half or so. And we'll see everybody at a future show. So thank you all very much.
All right. Peace out, guys.